You guys aren't going to believe which NBA players Paul George has fought over his NBA career. Paul George is a common name in the NBA, both for his excellent play on the floor, as well as the criticism that he receives on a daily basis. In recent years, George has been sort of a punching bag when it comes to fans and analysts, but sometimes he just has enough and puts his foot down. He's been doing that a lot more lately against other players when they decide to trash talk him, which has led to him fighting over 10 different players in the past few years. In this video, we'll go over just a few of the best fights throughout his career, including one with a player who he's now teammates with for the Clippers, but you'll just have to stick around and find out for yourselves. The list kicks off with a fight between Paul George and the young Devin Booker. The Los Angeles Clippers were playing the Phoenix Suns at the time, and they were just getting beaten up. Out of all the starters for the Clippers, George was the only one with a positive plus-minus, dropping 39 points. But frustration started boiling over as his tremendous efforts were going to waste, so he decided to get into it with another player. Him and Chris Paul went back and forth after an accidental elbow was handed out between the two players right in the middle of the game. The shove ended up knocking Chris to the ground, and he sprung up to get in the face of George. While the two were arguing, there was a ton of staff members and teammates trying to separate them so they wouldn't do anything worse than just talk. The two continued their trash talk while being separated, but George wasn't done just yet. In fact, he probably got even more mad after this confrontation. That exact same game, he got into it with Devin Booker. Both players had to be restrained for this one because it was that close to getting physical. Each player was handed double technical fouls, which of course meant they were ejected from the current ballgame. When he was asked about the altercation afterwards, George said that he has to answer criticism, especially from other players, because of how tough of a year he's had. He could have been talking about the 3-1 collapse the Clippers had against the Denver Nuggets in the second round of the postseason last year, but hey, who knows? George knows that criticism will come his way, and he stated numerous times that he'll stand up for himself and use it as motivation. He did just that during this next fight against Marcus Morris. While Paul was still on the Indiana Pacers, they had some bad blood with the Detroit Pistons. Maybe it was leftovers from that whole Malice at the Palace thing. So anyway, in this game, George wanted to show out for the fans and dominate the Pistons, and boy was he doing that. He dropped 32 points, including 21 in the fourth quarter on perfect shooting from the field. But as the game was coming to an end, George and Morris went after it. The two had been exchanging words for most of the game, but it came to a boiling point right at the final buzzer. With the Pistons already surrendering the game, a teammate tried passing to Morris to run out the shot clock, but George sprinted in and stole the ball from him even though the game was already over. Morris wasn't happy about that, so a little later he elbowed him in the back, with the two of them yelling back and forth and having to be separated. The mess that followed was pretty bad. There were tons of staff members and refs and teammates all running to help out, but it really looked more bad than good. Some of his teammates ended up getting into arguments with the opposing team themselves, while others were desperately trying to pull George and Morris apart. It's still shocking to me that these two now share the same uniform on the Clippers. Who would have guessed? Next up, we have a battle between Paul George and the Portland Trail Blazers center, Jusuf Nurkic. George was on the Oklahoma City Thunder at the time, and as most of you may know, this was the year that Damian Lillard sent the Thunder packing in the playoffs.
That's a bad shot. I don't care what anybody says, that's a bad shot.
These two teams did not like each other much at all this year, and that was obvious by this fight. Nurkic was getting in the heads of the opposing players all night long, actually involving himself in a few fights in this one matchup. At first, he was shoved to the ground by the elbow of George while he tried to defend against a layup. Then later, he almost tripped Russell Westbrook during a play. Then, while he was running back to play offense, Westbrook chased after him and gave him a hip check in center court. But with just 4 seconds left in the game, he and George decided that they wanted to let some frustrations out, with George headbutting Nurkic after a few words. Each of them received technical fouls for their parts in the scuffle, but Nurkic was confused as to why George was so upset after the game. This is what he had to say. "I don't know, some dudes turn into tough guys. I might have hit him in the face. I was going for the ball. I might have. He got touched in the face, so what? It wasn't intentional." One of the vice presidents of the NBA at the time had actually commented on the game as well, saying that the league knows that they will be imperfect at times, noting this fight as one of those times. I guess they felt they could have either handled the situation better or not have handed Nurkic a technical for simply being hit in the face. Now we get into an argument between Joe Ingles and Paul George. Everybody seems to know Joe Ingles as one of the biggest trash talkers and trolls in the league, and for good reason. During the first round of the Western Conference playoffs, Ingles and George found themselves going back and forth throughout one of their games. At first, it seemed like it was all in good fun, but apparently it went too far. Ingles walked over to George while the Thunder were trying to inbound the basketball, and Paul just straight up shoved him out of the way for no reason. A ref immediately gave George a technical foul for the shove, and Ingles answered back a little bit later. He splashed a three-pointer right in George's face and let him hear about it by taunting him and giving his back a small push. George sprinted after him and shoved him back, which resulted in a massive brawl on the court that ended up with 7 technical fouls and a Jay Crowder ejection. George didn't seem like he had any bad feelings after the game though, saying that's what you're gonna get with a playoff team. It's playoff basketball. It's gonna get chippy. It's going to get physical. Ingles seemingly echoed that sentiment by saying how much he loved the intensity and that he's never even spoken to Paul before that game. Though I can't imagine the two of them are best friends now after almost killing each other on the court in their first encounter. Now this next clip wasn't really a fight, but more of a smirk that had bad intentions. The Toronto Raptors were up against the Thunder, and it was the second quarter. Kawhi Leonard was still on the Raptors at the time and was being shadowed by George throughout the entire game. The two were annoying each other defensively, and one possession, Kawhi hit a fadeaway right in the mouth of Paul George, with the two of them exchanging angry smirks back at one another. While there was never any physical confrontation between the two men, it was clear that they were not fans of each other right then, which is funny because of how close they are now. But honestly, what else would you expect from a fight involving Kawhi Leonard? Literally nothing was said and there was no physical contact made. It's just perfect for Kawhi. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Also, remember to hit that bell icon so you don't miss another video. And be sure to tune into our next video for more amazing content that you won't want to miss out on. Check out some more NBA fights by clicking the video that appears on your screen.